Lawyers of Reddit, what is the most outrageous case someone has asked you to take? A year out of law school, I once had a potential client who wanted me to sue Canada. Apparently he could not get into the country due to his felony record. I tried to reason with him that it was up to the sovereign nation to set its own rules regarding entry to the country, but he insisted that we could make a lot of money suing Canada. I didn't take the case, but I told him I might be able to get him a letter that said sorry from Canada. Edit its to its. I dictated this on my phone as I was getting coffee. Thank God for the grammar people on Reddit for saving me from this catastrophic mistake in life. As a public defender, I defended a grown man accused of stealing magic cards from Walmart. There was an hour-long security video meticulously showing, from dozens of angles, that he was picking up sets of cards, unwrapping them and discarding the wrappers around the store. He insisted that he was innocent and we actually went to a jury trial instead of securing a plea deal. It took the jury 8 minutes to convict him and the judge laid into my client, telling him that he was the worst thief he had ever seen. I forgot the best part. At one point in the trial I had to spend 45 minutes explaining to the judge what magic cards are. He couldn't understand why anyone need more than one deck. I worked on a custody dispute between a mother and grandmother, where both sides were absolutely outraged by the other's claims. The mother was very upset that she was alleged to have been a stripper. I was a prostitute, but I was never a stripper. The grandmother, in return, was furious that she was alleged to have 21 cats in her 2-bedroom apartment. We only have 17 cats. How dare she flat out lie and say that we have 21 cats? The child ended up living with the father in a different state. I'm not a lawyer, but as a child I was taken into foster care and then returned to my father's custody, so he had custody of me from ages 4-16. When I was 22 he tried to sue me for the costs involved in caring for me for that time, saying that he had no obligation to take custody of me and had only done so to save me from foster care. It was obviously dismissed and I don't talk to him anymore. I work in patent law, and most of my cases are pretty mundane, small variations on items that you use every day, with enough innovation to warrant trying to profit off of it. Sometimes you get one that's actually innovative, which are the fun cases, but occasionally you get the client that's just a complete wacko. This guy, let's call him Vlad, strides into my office and lets me know he has a spectacular invention that he wants to show me, but that I must keep it secret. Vlad is a heavy-set Russian, the kind you'd expect to see in a gangster movie, with a thick accent to match. I explained that I would be happy to sign an NDA and that confidentiality will be assured. And he was appeased that his mysterious invention wouldn't be on the front page of the Times tomorrow. He asked me to come out to his office so he could show me. Now, I was a little nervous, given his physique and the secrecy with which he was handling all of this. So I asked one of our clerks to accompany me. I drove the three of us to his office, in complete silence. Any small talk I tried to make was stonewalled. Finally we got to his office building, which thankfully looked to be a legit workspace and not a back alley warehouse as I'd originally feared. He took us to a side office once we got to his floor, and pulled me aside. "This will be my greatest achievement," he whispered, before opening the door with a flourish. In the room there was nothing but a single bright red word painted on the wall. "What is this?" I asked him. He stood over me and gazed directly into my eyes. Breathing. I call it the serious tag. OP forgot to put one. Family law attorney here. I just had a custody case go back to court over eyeglasses. My client didn't like the glasses her ex bought the kid. So stupid. I want to go back to criminal defense. Gang homicide cases had nicer people to deal with than family law. A woman called saying that she had a product liability suit involving animal crackers she gave to her daughter. I was thinking it was going to be something to do with food poisoning and keep listening. She explained that when she looked at the crackers, it looked like the monkey was holding its D. It was a banana. This woman was mortified and ashamed. She said she told all her co-workers and they were very shocked and uncomfortable. I wanted to tell her she was nuts and that they were probably freaked out because you were talking about animal cracker Ds. Lawyer in a small town here. I mostly do estate planning, probate, old people stuff, etc. I have a client that sued his ex-wife for not selling the house after the divorce as she was supposed to. Judge held her in contempt and asked what he wanted my client to do, and he had her thrown in jail. They are both nearly 80 years old. The client also has something valuable buried on his property for his grandchildren after he dies. I have a sealed letter in my desk that he pays me a goodly sum each month to hold and give to his grandson when the old man dies. I had a potential client come in and say that he wanted to sue his uncle for murder. Setting aside the fact that you can't sue someone for murder, I asked him who did his uncle murder. He replied me. I turned the case down. There's a lot of them. I've been asked to evict a ghost. I actually did that one. I regularly get phone calls promising to make me a millionaire if I'll sue the police. There's the completely guilty 6 offender sitting in jail who wanted me to handle his appeal under circumstances that would have resulted in him being released, then immediately charged and convicted of a more serious crime. So many. Not a lawyer, but my uncle once had a client trying to sue Sears for distributing pornography to minors because he caught his 12-year-old son masturbating to the lingerie section. While working at a plaintiff's employment firm, 2 memorable consults came in. 1. Guy gets fired for being late too much. Wants to sue for discrimination because he has a sugar addiction and needs to stop at 7-11 for a big gulp before his shift begins. As a result, he usually ends up missing the bus. 2. A woman comes in. She was a bus driver and was terminated during her probationary period. She had 3 accidents in 6 weeks. She wants to sue for discrimination because she has anxiety and a therapy rabbit, all the while sitting at the conference room table petting the therapy bunny. Edit. Grammar typos. Not lawyer but paralegal. I took a cold call one evening from a gentleman who was clearly high, probably meth, and homeless. He wanted to sue his local police dispatch, 911, paramedics and a hospital. We're a civil litigation firm, because he knocked on someone who was now, allegedly, trying to get him. It was now the police station's fault that he would have to stab the guy, and he repeatedly asked me if he should carry a knife so he could do said stabbing. He apparently had also asked the 911 dispatch this same question, and all they would tell him is that no, he should not in fact go stab someone. Also asked if he should go stab the other guy before he had a chance to get him. He then wanted to come hide at our office while keeping his knife and deciding where to go stab the other guy. Definitely most surreal phone call of my life thus far. And before it's asked, no, we didn't report the situation to anyone. We are in a large city and he said his location was up north. Did not give us his name and we don't have caller ID. Very old boss. Hates technology because he can't understand it. So we really didn't have anything to give the police as far as useful information. Fun times. When I was a trainee solicitor, my principal had a guy come in who spoke almost exclusively in quotes from US presidents. This was a specialist law firm in a very English town. And the dude was about as English as it's possible to be. Tweed suit with leather elbow patches English. He wasn't initially anything to do with me, but half an hour into the initial meeting my principal wandered into my office totally exasperated, which I'd never seen before, and she said, paraphrasing here, "Crow eggs. You're a patient man. Find out what this batted loon actually wants. It'll be a good first case evaluation for you to handle by yourself." I spent 2 hours listening to him talk. Literally every second sentence began with "as Woodrow Wilson once said," or "as Grover Cleveland once said." He even managed to quote Taft. I mean, even the craziest of crazy doesn't quote Taft. It's Taft, for Christ's sake. Anyway, after 2 hours I explained how much the meeting was costing him even though I was just a trainee. And he visibly sagged and said, all blurted out like a naughty child, "I poured bleach on the roots of my neighbor's tree and it fell into my greenhouse. Can you make him pay for the repairs?" I gently explained why that wouldn't work. And he cried. So I called the loveliest secretary in the firm who made him a cup of tea and sat with him until he went home. I didn't have this case, but Ernie Chambers actually tried to bring a lawsuit against God. It was dismissed because God couldn't be notified because he did not have an address. Criminal prosecutor here. A patrol officer pulled over a driver for some traffic violation. I think failure to signal. After a heated roadside exchange where the driver initially refused to turn over her license, She ultimately relented and thrust the license with undue force into the officer's outstretched hand. The cop charged her with aggravated assault on a law enforcement officer. When asked to justify his actions, he stated that people need to learn to respect the police. We dismissed the charge, apologized to the defendant, and told the cop to never bring us something like that again. I can't recall if Internal Affairs was notified. I work with the police every day, and the majority of them are good people. This guy was a bit. A prospective client once called me to ask if I did personal injury cases because she felt a fall coming on. A woman had cut off her husband's hand maliciously and was facing time and a divorce. She wanted me to help her sue the knife manufacturer for damages. Walking to work at the moment. I could probably let you know a few more if you are interested. Source: work in law firm in Cleveland, Ohio. I remember a guy called me and wanted to take action against the post office. He had received a letter from them saying that they would no longer deliver packages to him as he was never appropriately dressed when he opened the door to accept them. I remember being nervous about asking him to elaborate. I recently settled a broken D case. That was kind of crazy. Our firm represents a lot of veterans. We get several calls a year from vets who allege a microchip or transmitter was put inside their head. They claim to hear radio waves, that it interrupts their thoughts, that they were experimented on, etc. Those are always weird calls. In college one summer I worked for a firm that was processing thousands of hurricane damage and injury claims. Sometimes claimants would call the firm to ask questions or start a claim, and we would take turns answering those calls. One day this guy called claiming that when the water level rose after the hurricane, sharks escaped from the city aquarium and he was attacked by one of them. He sounded insane, kept providing all these crazy details, and claimed that his D and testicle had been bitten and his wife no longer loved him because he couldn't perform like he used to. I didn't take the call but was sitting next to the guy that did. About 10 minutes in, I looked past the guy on the phone and saw 3 co-workers cracking up in the hall. It turned out the shark guy was actually a co-worker prank calling the office from his cell phone. He kept it going about 40 minutes until he finally broke character. It was awesome. Years ago, I had someone ask me, informally, whether he should sue the Jerry Springer show because they turned his family down as guests. Yeah, out of there real quick. Not a lawyer, but worked in a law firm. Had a potential client who needed to access something on a high shelf. When she was at work, instead of using the step that was provided, she took it upon herself to take her shoes off and stand on her chair to reach the shelf. She forgot about her own shoes on the way down and tripped over them. She tried to blame her employers. That's not how it works. Live. There was another woman using a vacuum cleaner in her own home and she tripped over the lead. When we asked who it was in particular, she intended to sue, as there was nothing wrong with the vacuum cleaner, and no actual injury. She became confused and confessed she did not know. She just thought she could claim from someone. Pretty tame examples, but amusing at the time. Some people just need saving from themselves. Edit. This was in the UK, for all those wondering. Criminal defense social worker at a legal aid organization. I had a client who ran 3 red lights on a very busy street, knocked over a police officer, drove up on the sidewalk, forcing people to jump out of the way, and was finally dragged out of his car in a parking lot. He wanted us to refer him to a civil attorney to sue the city because an officer was too rough with him during his arrest. I mean, I get it. They were probably rough with him. Police brutality in my city is real, but good luck with that lawsuit. My parents are both attorneys. Most recently, their batshit crazy neighbor asked my dad to serve as his attorney in a slip and fall suit against my parents. He had come over unannounced and uninvited at 6 AM on a snowy morning and fell down our driveway. My dad was the one who helped him up and called the ambulance on his behalf. The next day, crazy neighbor dropped off legal documents in my parents' mailbox for my dad to look over to see if he had a case against my dad. And this is why I hate people. Well, one client asked me to prove that dinosaurs didn't exist. Tried to sue a history book or something. Another customer wanted to sue Lucasfilms for killing his favorite character in the movies, Han Solo. Someone just asked me to modify their child support because they lost their job. The kid is 17 years, 11 months old. Get the duck out of my office. Edit. For some clarity, in my state, child support always ends at 18 or 19 if the child is pursuing a high school diploma or get at an accredited institution. This child has already graduated HS. Not a lawyer, but my good friend's boyfriend is a big shot lawyer downtown and works on high profile cases. That is a target breach, and he had told us about a case involving a nurse. This nurse was contracted out by a hospital downtown and hired to give flu vaccines to patients residents at a local string of assisted living homes. According to the background information I was given, hepatitis C was very common back in the baby boomer days from lack of knowledge of STDs and lack of effective protection. Apparently this nurse decided it would be a good idea to reuse the needle they had on every single patient. From looking back on the records, one of the first few people she immunized had Hep C and she ended up giving it a bunch of seniors. Wasn't given the exact number, but it was so bad that they had to contact the CDC and consider it an outbreak. The best part was that the family of the elderly were suing the nurse and the nursing homes. The nursing homes were suing the nurse and the hospital that contracted her out. The nurse tried suing the hospital for lack of training. Also, the nurse had been given warnings before and was previously let go from another job because she was reusing needles. TL. Doctor nurse reuses vaccine needle and gives a bunch of old people Hep C. Standard preface of, not a lawyer but I know someone. I met somebody who went to law school and was still friends with a lawyer for a group that wanted to hunt endangered animals. They paid the lawyer to look for ways to legally do it and to protect them if anybody brought a lawsuit to them. Edit. Okay. I am going to reformat the anti-PETA statement because, as most people have pointed out, the well-known irony of PETA's mission. Edit. I am going to delete the PETA statement because it is seeming to detract from my initial comment. Many years ago, when I was still a trainee solicitor, my then mentor wanted me to see a client on his behalf. He didn't give me any details other than he was a new client and I was to take initial instructions. Criminal law BTW. So there I am, keen but wet behind the ears, when this very large man comes into my small office and starts to inquire about the legal age of consent. 16 in my country. He then tells me the reason is he wants to start producing porn and wants to be sure about the law. Well, then that changes the answer, as it is a different question. 18 in my country. He gets upset and animated saying how he wanted to produce porn that had much younger girls in it. 14ish. I explain the legal implications of this and how he would find himself in jail in very little time. He then goes on to his next idea, which is he wants to produce porn for animals. Not bestiality or anything like that. Videos of two animals making love, and he wants to retail it to domestic pets. At this point my mentor had overheard some if not all of the consultation. Without saying a word he walks into my office. To my desk. I kept a picture of my family dog on my desk. He takes the picture of my dog off my desk and leaves the room. It was the strangest consultation I have ever had to this day. Ianal. But a neighbor was. She was once asked to defend a bloke who'd been doing something rather odd. It all started when the bloke's neighbors complained to the local council about the stench coming from his bins. The council came to have a butcher's at it and found it to be stuffed with a shed load of dead chickens. Not restaurant waste chickens, or out of date ones. Fully feathered ones. A quick poke at the chickens revealed that it wasn't the first time they'd been poked, and that these unfortunate birds had in fact been ducked to death by the wrong kind of cock. A speedy search warrant was executed, and a 5mm thick rubber apron was found, complete with cock hole with scratches all around it. It was caked in bloody feathers and cum. According to the lab reports, after a bit of investigation, it turned out that his wife held the chickens and effectively jerked him off with them, with his cock through the hole in the apron, and thigh feet scrabbling away at the rubber until they died. And then she'd grab another and go at it again until he coughed his filthy yacht into them. His defense was that he wasn't actually screwing them. His wife was doing the screwing by moving the feathery duck pillows. She said that the case rested on the fact that there was no way the chickens could have been shown as consensual in the whole thing. He and his missus did similar amounts of time for it. Full stop. Well, not me, but my father is a lawyer, and a man wanted to hire him so he could defend his son on the trial after the mentioned son killed his mother. My father couldn't take it. I mean, he had worked some pretty ducked up cases with gang members and drug dealers, but I guess this one was too low even for him. I'm late to the game lawyer. Once had a gentleman come to my office with an interest in suing his former employer. My office is general civil litigation, and I handle our employment matters. As an aside to that, he also specifically asked for a female attorney for reasons not related to this story. I met with him for about half an hour. He explained that he had been terminated from his employment and believed it to be gender biased. In my jurisdiction, an employer needs to show a legitimate, non-discriminatory reason for discharge, and while this hurdle can be overcome, it's a high one. I asked him if he had ever been disciplined, cited, or written up in the past, to establish if the employer would be able to say he was an unfit worker if he had an unblemished record. Our job is easier. He said yes, 12 times, in 2 years. I finished the interview, thanked him for his interest in our business, but told him we would not be able to take the case. I sent him off with a few referral numbers, but I don't know if he ever found someone to take his case. A fellow came to me in 1996 and said he was able to stop his grand mal seizures by smoking pot. He was a very difficult, sometimes abusive hothead with a long history of criminal cases. He had no money. He wanted to make pot legal in Canada. Many lawyers had already turned him away. I took it on, very reluctantly. It was obviously a complete long shot, but I was young and ambitious. George Soros Foundation learned about the challenge, funded the case and provided some experts. A few years later, and too many hours, arguments, tears and sleepless nights to count, damned if he didn't win. His case became the national template for medical marijuana in Canada. The clients wanted full legalization, so he was disappointed with the result. Oh well, I tried. Had a case where a man refused to pay rent because his apartment smelled terrible and was making him sick. His landlord tried to evict him. A few days after taking the case and before his first hearing, the ceiling in his bathroom collapsed. Turns out some plumbing wasn't connected and his ceiling walls had been filling with poop for months. The landlord settled pretty quickly after that. Had a fellow call my office and tell me he wanted our firm to handle negotiations with some of the big companies in the vinyl siding industry. I figured he had some new product that he wanted to sell or license. But no. When he came in, he disclosed that he had discovered a defect in the vinyl siding and actually wanted us to demand a large sum of money from these companies, or else he was going to disclose this defect to the news. Turns out he was a day laborer who had just recently been assigned to a construction project and discovered that you can cut vinyl house siding with a sharp knife, which is the way it is actually cut on site to be installed. The siding is supposed to be installed over a plywood backing, but his boss had told him to skip putting up the backing panels to save money. He felt that homeowners were in danger because, without the wood backing, criminals could use this knowledge to enter people's houses, and he felt it was his solemn duty to report this to the public. That is, unless the vinyl siding companies were to cough up a bunch of cash. Basically, his employer was scamming customers and he felt that justified his extortion of the manufacturers and wanted us to legitimize his efforts to extort money from this industry. It was a little uncomfortable to point out that, in fact, he and his boss were the criminals, and that he really didn't have a case. Detective here, not a lawyer, but once had a man want me to charge his wife's lover with sexual assault because she was mentally coerced into having an affair. I told him that Jedi mind tricks don't meet elements of the offense. He filed a complaint against me which was unfounded. My brother, fresh out of law school, was asked to defend the fraternity being sued for defecating in the dorm room of the pledge who did not finish his bid to be a brother. He called the co-defendants and the plaintiff the poopers and the poopy respectively in our group text. A company wants me to patent their competitor's slogan, arguing it has no trademark registration. When I explained them a slogan is not protectable by patent, that slogans cannot be deposited for trademark registration, and that patents and trademarks are two very distinct forms of monopoly, they asked me apply for a generic intellectual property over the slogan. They then proceeded to explain there is no generic intellectual property, and that although there would be ways to protect that subject matter, not every IP right is acquired through registration. This means, as I explained, The competitor holds protection over the slogan. Moreover, I explained that their request is majorly unlawful. They did not budge. I ended up explaining them about ethics and being very firm about refusing to honor their request. Our contract is now rescinded. Edit. Clarification. My dad had to defend Nintendo against a Japanese magician who claimed that the Pokemon characters Abra and Kadabra infringed upon his likeness. Edit. Grammar. I'm on mobile. Not a lawyer but a family friend is. She had someone come to her asking to sue Starbucks because someone spilled their latte or smoothie or whatever on the sidewalk and she slipped on it and hit her head. She claimed Starbucks was at fault because it wouldn't have happened if Starbucks didn't put extra slippery whipped cream in the drink. Not a story from me but from my stepmother. Once, she was asked to and took a case involving alleged workplace racism, where an African American woman was offended by a man making a joke about African and European swallows in response to someone's question about swallows. According to her, she literally had to buy and play clips from a VHS copy of Monty Python and the Holy Grail in court to show the woman that it wasn't racism, just a Monty Python reference. Luckily, the guy she accused won, and our family got to keep the VHS tape. I work as a paralegal for a small but really old law firm in Texas. I work with a few attorneys who handle estate planning and wills. This man was a doctor, died. He was worth about $2 million. He wasn't very wealthy, and we also handled a lot bigger cases. But he had 5 kids and an ex-wife. After he divorced, he came out as gay and moved in with his partner. After he died, his will stated that his house and money would go to his partner. His kids tried to argue it. We ended up going through mediation. His partner actually requested a paternity test on the father's frozen specimen. It took a lot of legal pull and bullet, but in the end, it turns out all 5 kids were not actually related to the now deceased father. The partner got to keep the estate. Lawyer here. Breakup. They were not married. Client let his ex live in his house with her new boyfriend until her child, not my client's child, school year ends. Very reasonable and understanding as hell. All in child's interest. Client was rich and bought and paid for everything. Finally they move out. When we arrived there was nothing to see. She dug up half the 3-meter high spruce hedge with her boyfriend. Half is hers, she said. They planted them together. They probably burned it because we found some branches in the barrel behind the house, where there has clearly been burned something. House was cleaned out. They took even the spoons and carpets. 3 years already is this going on and I'm fighting over a duckine toilet brush and worthless carpets in court, which is in the list among 300 other items. Last time there were curtains and a boat carrier. I hate family law. Client just has a matter of principle. Edit. Grammarzism caused edit.